Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, continuing our summer scout and heading into the 2023 season, taking a look at one of the more exciting teams as we roll into the 2023 season. That's the Tennessee Volunteers. Our guy Joe Milton at quarterback with one of the offenses that I just have a blast to watch. This is a team that I think a lot of fans are really excited about, not only just taking that next step, but kind of that sticking power as one of those elite SEC teams. I think Josh Heupel's done a phenomenal job with this program. And if you're a Tennessee fan, you got to be really happy about where this program is at under Josh Heupel. Now, before we get into the team, just want to say thank you to you guys. The support during summer scouting has been awesome. And more importantly, we learn so much from you guys who watch Tennessee every day. So let us know in the comment section what you guys think of the preview. If we're sleeping on some players, please let us know. Again, we learn a ton from you guys, so appreciate you rocking with the boys. And if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, I'm going to kick this one off to you. How are we feeling about these Vols heading into 2023?
I mean, just to start off, I think Tennessee has found their coach, and it's been a long time. Obviously, it probably dates back to Philip Fulmer in terms of a coach you can legit believe in. But I think it feels like Heupel's the guy. The recruiting's gone in the right direction for sure.
100%.
And what you talk about, just the ability to develop a quarterback, what he did with Hendon Hooker from his Virginia Tech days to what he put out on Tennessee, I think that's as good of a job developing a player as you'll ever see. And that, frankly, has been very much an Achilles heel for this Tennessee program since probably Peyton Manning almost.
That doesn't get enough attention, the fact that Hendon Hooker was riding the bench at Virginia Tech for a little bit. And then 2 years in Josh Heupel, and we're talking about an NFL draft quarterback, a guy that arguably would have won the Heisman had he not gotten hurt. That's what they did with Hendon Hooker is so exciting, and that kind of is a nice transition to talking about Joe Milton as Michigan fans. I'm sure the Tennessee fans can understand the skepticism of Joe Milton. We watched Joe Milton miss throw after throw, read after read, and it's nice to see the offseason clips of him throwing 80 yards down the field. I love it. That being said, what we saw with him wearing the maize and blue, I don't know if I'm sold yet. That being said, what Josh Heupel did with Hendon Hooker and what I think he can do with Joe Milton, Dill, you got to be pumped to see Joe Milton kind of take the reins of this offense.
I mean, frankly, I would have said the same thing about Hendon Hooker last year. Probably is I'm not sold on his game, and again, that's the thing is Michigan didn't have a Josh Heupel. Now with Josh Heupel again, that turnaround with Hendon makes me think man, if he can do that with Joe Milton and channel that raw talent into something that kind of produces on the field, Joe Milton's a scary good quarterback. You saw the moments of that in the game against Clemson where he threw some really good balls. Those slants over the middle in the red zone, those are big-time NFL throws. Some of those deep balls he hit. If he can do that consistently through a whole year and not make the mistakes he used to make back in his Michigan days, I think he can lead this team and not gonna go overboard and say national title, but they can be really, really good.
I think it's not crazy to argue that the ceiling with this offense might even be higher with Joe Milton than Hendon Hooker. And I'm excited. I'm rooting for him. 6-year guy. He's kind of waited his turn behind Hendon Hooker and hand up.
Transfer after he waited his turn. It's okay, now it's his show, and you are rooting for him. I had nothing no reason to dislike him from the Michigan days. Obviously the play wasn't good, but he always felt good to have around the program, and never nothing negative came.
100%.
I wouldn't say.
So Joe Milton, very excited to see him. And again, hand up, I was so wrong. I was Tennessee's going to get smoked by Clemson. They got Joe Milton throwing the ball, and then that is what it is. Now, one question you have is you lose Jalen Hyatt, who was awesome. I think Cedric Tillman might have been that best. When healthy, Cedric Tillman's an absolute dog. And you lose two of arguably the best receivers in the SEC from last year. That being said, I think you're really excited about what the talent is in terms of the pass catchers. Starts with Brew McCoy. Brew McCoy, a former 5-star, all the talent in the world. And I think this could be his coming out party. And he was really solid last year, but now he's the guy in this offense. You have Squirrel White, who's just my guy. And then
that game against Clemson put him on the map. It's
100%, he's a dog.
This guy can play, and I'm looking for him to have a huge year, I think.
And I think probably the most underrated transfer portal addition that like nobody talked about is Dante Thornton Jr., who 6'4", absolutely burns vertically. If you're looking to replace someone like Jalen Hyatt, like in terms of just straight line speed and the ability to just win vertically down the field, Tennessee fans and I think national fans, like national college football fans, should get to know the name Dante Thornton Jr. because I think he's going to be kind of that Jalen Hyatt of last
I
year.
mean, he was overshadowed by Franklin in Oregon.
Yeah, 100%.
He's awesome. I was stunned to see him in the portal, and like people were acting like nothing happened. I was like, we got one of the better wide receivers probably in the. I don't want to say in the country, but he was like not. I mean, he's no slouch by any means.
In terms of being gifted, he's one of the more talented receivers in the country, and I'm with you. Like it seemed like nobody wanted to talk about Dante Thornton Jr. going to Tennessee. It's a perfect landing spot for him, and he might be like kind of that guy. And again, we're like not to like overshadow like Ramel Keaton. He's a very very solid pass catcher as well. I think you're bringing in McAllen Castles from the FCS level, who's just like a big frame. Kind of excited about what he can bring, but okay, quarterback, wide receivers, the running backs are super solid. You're bringing them back. Dill, the story of this Tennessee offense might be how dominant this offensive line group can be, even when you lose a guy like Darnell Wright. Because I love their offensive line and their ability to run the football last year was good, and I think they'll be able to run the football again this year just as well.
I mean, their one big loss was probably Darnell Wright, and they replaced him with John Campbell Jr., who obviously coming over from Miami can really play. And then everyone else was really good. I mean, the three they're getting back in Mays, Spraggins, and Mincy, all I
really
thought, especially those two inside guys. Yes. I thought Spraggins and Mays looked like legit pros. And I mean, you're right. Like to say it, Tennessee, everything about this offense, I think, is really good. And the weapons are there. It's Joe Milton. Can he put it together? But the pieces are in place for him. And again, to just be in that offense-friendly system that they have with Josh Heupel, I think there's a good chance that, again, Joe Milton does come out and just play really better than a lot of people think, given what we kind of expect.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like the one thing I'm looking for Joe Milton, and that's something that was like so underrated with Hendon Hooker is, especially at the college level, like consistency at the quarterback position is not always, and it's not always there, right? Hendon Hooker was so consistent for Tennessee that I think that was like he never made any splash throws or truly special throws. But that got overshadowed by just how much he was accurate with the football. If Joe Milton can do that, like it's all fun and games to throw the 80-yard touchdown, but if he can make those throws, like this offense is going to be great. And Dill, one of the other like underrated parts of this Tennessee offense that I feel like so much of this Tennessee team last year was the Hendon Hooker show, and he's like carrying this team. Like this was a bona fide good college football team last year. They could have run the ball, and that defense, outside of like maybe some issues in the secondary, like this front seven, it's a pretty damn good group.
That's what I'm thinking, and I know they're losing Byron Young, and he was really, really good. But I think Tyler Barron was awesome. I think those two inside guys are really good. And frankly, I'm looking for Joshua Josephs to step up and play dominant. I thought like he played a fair amount as a freshman. Maybe not like a dominant freshman like a Dallas Turner was his first year of college football, but I feel like you see the length, the athleticism, the speed, the power, like he flashed the traits you need to flash, I think, to be a really good player. And if he can step up and be really good, because Tyler Barron's not really a true edge guy. He is much more of a disruptive. He can play kind of across the line, not take anything away from him, but if they really want a dominant guy on the edge, I think it's going to be Joshua Josephs. I think the talent's there. I'm looking for him to have a monster year.
So add him to the notebook. I can attest. Dill's been very, very fired up to talk some Joshua.
I saw him give it to Blake Miller at Clemson a couple times, a guy who I thought played really, really good all year. Like he's gonna have a good year.
I'm irritated about the Amari Thomas. We've been banging the table for Amari Thomas for like 2 years now, and now it's the cool thing. Now he's getting all SEC honors. The boys are on him. Like we were talking Amari Thomas 2 years ago, last year for sure.
This number 21 flashed on my screen.
Yeah, like we've been on Amari Thomas. All right, getting to that linebacker group, you lose Jeremy Banks, but Aaron Beasley coming back. Like Aaron Beasley was phenomenal, and then Keenan Pili. Like that's another really good linebacker. It's really hard to have like two really consistent linebackers who can find the football and fill their gaps. Tennessee has him with Keenan Pili and Aaron Beasley.
In two guys, especially in Beasley, who just fly around and make big plays behind the line of scrimmage. And that's something that I think a lot of teams lack, is having aggressive linebackers who will go make, big plays, like game-changing plays. It's okay to have a bunch of tackles, but if they're 5 yards down the field, it just doesn't matter that much. Aaron Beasley is a guy, especially him. Just having watched a little bit of Tennessee today, he's a guy who is super aggressive. I think,
100%.
again, makes those big splash plays that get the defense going, get everyone rolling, similar to what, frankly, Banks did last year. I thought Banks, that aggressiveness, that was kind of a new mindset for this Tennessee team that was bend but don't break for so long. It felt like with a lot of coaches before what Heupel and his staff have brought in, that newfound energy, I almost think.
So this Tennessee defense, like if there was a concern, they were like phenomenal against the run. It wasn't the secondary. And I would like to preface this conversation with any defense across from the Josh Heupel offense is not going to put up phenomenal numbers like on the surface, right? And you look at like yards per game, points per game, which they were actually pretty good in. The passing yards per game, I think they were like 128, gave up like 290. Tennessee on paper in terms of yards per game, points per game, they're not going to be top 25 because it's impossible when you're opposite of like Josh Heupel's offense. They're scoring in 5 plays. You're just going to be on the field too much as a defense. So you're not going to have elite numbers, but this defense was solid. And if there was one kind of sore spot, it was probably in that secondary. You looked back at games at South Carolina where like Spencer Rattler just pieces you up, or Alabama was having kind of their way through the air. If this group can just take some steps and you return some guys that you like this Tennessee defense is probably one of the better groups in the SEC.
And I think you're just looking for the defense, like these secondary players, to play the ball a little better. It felt like a lot of pass interference, not getting your eyes on the ball. But these are guys who are coming in like experienced vets, all coming back for the most part. You got to think they take a step. You saw we've seen cornerbacks in college kind of make that transition from being a guy who doesn't play the football, and once they build some confidence and maybe get their year of starting, that's what you got to hope. Because again, I think this team's talented. I really do think Daneko Slaughter is a really, really good player. They just got to be more consistent playing the football, and they should be fine. They're good enough athletes or good enough players. It's just, can they bring?
It's an experienced group. Like you look up and down, it's 4th, 5th year guys. You bring in another transfer from BYU in the back end. Like this is an experienced group that if they can put it together, again, this defense is gonna be super solid. It's again all the hype around this Tennessee team is gonna go to the offense, and for good reason. This offense is one of the best in the country. That being said, I don't think this defense is nearly the liability that a lot of people like to act like it. Now, though, the last piece of the puzzle is the schedule, which I think opens up relatively easy, right? Virginia stinks, Austin Peay stinks. You go on the road to Florida. If this Tennessee team is as good as we think, probably should take care of business against Florida. UTSA, I know you're hearing a bunch of trap games for that. Like UTSA has an offense, but I think Tennessee is just going to outscore.
Also, they're not playing Georgia the week before. It's I get Florida's a brand name, but they're not Tennessee right now. That's
yeah. And then so the meat of the schedule, I think there's 3 games that I'm kind of circling, and maybe add a 4th with South Carolina on the road at Bama. You playing Georgia, and I'd probably throw in that Texas A&M game as kind of a trap game, if you will. Looking forward to the Alabama game as Texas A&M. They have the potential to bang with anyone in the SEC. You got to be on your P's and Q's. But outside of on the road at Alabama and Georgia, Tennessee, I think is a pretty significant favorite in all of these games.
Yeah, and that's to say, you're never going to have an easy schedule in the SEC.
No, never.
Most of the teams are really good. Even like a Kentucky or South Carolina, who maybe aren't quite they're not the top of the conference, but those are dangerous teams. They both can win games versus a lot of football teams. And it's not going to be easy. It never will be, but Tennessee is good. That's just, I think, the difference is Tennessee is, I think, separated themselves from the middle of that SEC East, in my opinion.
100%. And it gets to the point where, you saw it, Tennessee plays their best game. They can beat a team like Alabama. Now, it gets to the point of Joe Milton being consistent. Because, there are a bunch of games that if you get the Michigan Joe Milton, it's going to be hard to win those games. If Joe Milton can stay consistent, something that was the most underrated part of Hendon Hooker's game, I like this Tennessee team besides the 2 on the road at Bama versus Georgia. And again, what makes Tennessee fans feel good about that is you have the firepower to beat those teams if you can put it together and play your best game. So for this Tennessee team, like it's going to be one of the more, as I knock over my mic, it's going to be one of the more fun teams to watch in the SEC. Cannot wait to watch.
They're just not overmatched by anyone at this point anymore. I don't think. I mean, if Georgia
getting there,
if Georgia really cooks, like Georgia's a problem for everyone in the country. Obviously, since it's been a little bit Georgia kind of separating themselves from the whole world. But when you can score like Tennessee, you can shock anyone.
You have the fight. And then what's the most exciting part about this Tennessee program is they're starting to release some recruit some dudes on the defense side of the ball. And so if they can continue to do that and get some of those difference makers again in a couple of years with Big Nico, which we probably should have talked about, like this Tennessee team is going to be absolutely dangerous. Again, appreciate you guys checking out the boys. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. But more importantly, let us know in the comment section what you guys are thinking. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk.